The largest gathering of world leaders ever just ended. It was in Paris, and the subject was the climate crisis. President Obama, in his closing remarks expressed optimism that we can make progress on this. He said there's a huge global consensus on this. It may not, the consensus may not extend to the building and the body in which you serve. Nonetheless, he thinks world leaders are prepared to act. Where are you on the optimistic, pessimistic scale?
So this is what I think. I think the climate situation is worse than we think it is, right? The conventional wisdom around how bad climate is, I think it's worse. If you look at the data, the trends are worsening and they're more concerning. And the threat to American prosperity and global prosperity is huge. And I think the president is pitch perfect in the way he's described this problem. But I also think the technology, the innovation in the United States of America against this problem is better than most people think it is. If you look at the progress we've made in solar, in wind, in conservation, in batteries, all the things you need to change the energy mix in this country, the technology is doing really well. So what we ought to be doing, and Bill Gates actually has come out in the last couple of weeks and been very thoughtful on this topic, we need to do two things. Government should be pricing carbon, right? So we start kind of changing the playing field and stop all these subsidies that we have towards carbon-based energies and give non-carbon-based energies an opportunity to compete, which is why I've proposed legislation that does that. And then the second thing we need to do is dramatically increase our investments in R&D around green tech. The combination of those two things coming together in the kind of innovative economy we have here in the United States of America, I think will create the environment where we can really radically change how we produce, distribute, and use energy in this country and actually make a difference against this. And this is what the president and his leadership is so important. A lot of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who don't acknowledge that this is a problem, which is ridiculous. Every serious scientist has acknowledged this is a problem. Polls have come out recently have indicated that the majority of the American people, Democrats and Republicans, believe this is a problem. There are really smart free market solutions to this problem. The president's leadership, with his use at almost 200 countries, right, who are now focused on this, I think this has been a real breakthrough moment for us. You and a small number of Democrats voted with Republicans in the House on the Syrian refugee bill. I'm curious what the reaction has been from your constituents, and do you have any regrets for that vote? No, I don't have regrets. I mean, about a quarter of the Democrats voted for the bill. I think the reaction has been interesting because I think of all the legislation that's come through the Congress, this piece of legislation in particular has not been well understood and has been described generally by the media, no disrespect intended, as something very different than what it was. What the bill simply did is require the administration to certify that the processes they have in place around ensuring that the refugees that come into the country pose no risk of terrorism, that they actually certify that they're doing those things. That's all the legislation did. It didn't limit the number of refugees. It didn't put up any specific barriers to preventing refugees from coming in. In fact, I've been on the record for a long time, as have many of my colleagues who also supported this legislation, saying we should increase the number of refugees we bring into the country. When you look at what the tragedy and the scale of the problem over there, my view, and many of my colleagues' view, has been if people really trust that the government is doing the screening to a high standard, that creates the environment for even allowing more refugees to come in. And this legislation simply put the administration in a position where they had to certify they're doing what they say they're doing. Based on what they say they're doing, they're running a very thorough process. Right? And I support that. And I think what we voted for was to have them just put their name on the dotted line. I understand why they want to do it. No one likes to sign certificates kind of saying, confirming they're doing the processes. Why would anyone want to do that if they didn't have to? But if you really look at what that legislation did, that's all it did, is it simply said they have to certify that they're doing what they say they're doing. We have about a minute left. Under the leadership of new Speaker Paul Ryan, as you look ahead the next few weeks or months, do you have any concerns about one issue or another issue being used to create some sort of government funding crisis? We have about 50 seconds left. Yes, I do. I mean, we have these appropriations omnibus bill that we have to do. I'm very concerned that things like Planned Parenthood and other nonsense, and if you think about how destructive that rhetoric has been, particularly in the context of the recent tragedy in Colorado. I'm very concerned that some of those efforts will get put into this bill, which, I think is bad governing, bad policy. I mean, I could go on with all the problems with it. So we'll see if Speaker Ryan actually behaves differently than what we saw in some of these tactics in the past. I mean, if you do whether it's a debt ceiling bill or a government funding bill, it ought to be clean, it ought to focus on that issue, and it shouldn't be cluttered with other ornaments on the tree that are unrelated to the core point of the bill. And that's what we've seen in the past, and I worry we might see that again.
Congressman John Delaney, he's a Democrat from the 6th District of Maryland. He's with us today as part of our Connect to Congress series. Congressman, we appreciate your time as always. We thank you for being here, and we'll talk with you again, I'm sure.